The sacks moved. At first, Eli thought it was just the wind rattling the canvas. Old grain bags slung over the heads of the two figures sitting silent in his wagon. But then one of them shifted, ever so slightly. A small shoulder jerked, then stilled again. A breath was being held. A sob, maybe. He gripped the reins tighter. Sun was bleeding across the flat plains, gold light carving long shadows through the bones of the land. His horse, Buckshot, stomped restlessly in the dirt as if sensing something unspoken. In the back of the wagon, beneath the burlap sacks, sat the reason he hadn't slept a damn second the night before. 2 children, bound, gagged, and delivered to him like sacks of flour by men whose eyes never stayed on his for long. "They're for transport," was all Hank Travers had said. "Don't ask, don't look. Just drive 'em east, to where the railroad camps need helping hands." Helping hands. That's what they called it now. Eli knew better. But let's go back to where it started. Eli Beckett wasn't a good man. He'd never said so, and no one had ever accused him of it either. 42 years old, weathered like an old saddle, his face half hidden under a battered hat and a beard that didn't grow quite right on one side after a horse kicked him years ago. He lived quiet on a patch of land west of Dry Basin, just far enough that no one came uninvited. That suited him just fine. Most folks knew his story, or thought they did. Civil War vet, lost his wife in childbirth, buried a son that never took a breath, came west to outrun ghosts and stayed to tend fence lines and mend water wheels. Every Saturday he rode into town, traded pelts or dried meat, bought coffee and tobacco, then rode back before dusk. Didn't drink much, didn't talk much. That was Eli. So when Hank Travers rode out to his ranch 2 nights back with 3 other men and a wagon covered in canvas, Eli knew something wasn't right. You didn't bring guns to a neighbor's doorstep unless you were trying to say something without using words. Hank grinned, tobacco-stained teeth poking through a cracked lip. "Need a favor?" he said. Eli didn't answer, just waited. "Got a delivery needs making. Delicate cargo. Won't fuss. Needs discretion, though." Eli stepped off his porch, boots crunching gravel. "What kind of delivery?" Hank's grin faded, and his eyes flicked to the wagon. "You're heading east anyhow, right? Said last week you was going for seed." Eli narrowed his eyes. "What's in the wagon?" Hank hesitated just a breath too long. "Orphans," he said. "From the reservation." That word hit like a whip crack. Eli's spine stiffened. "They consented?" he asked flatly. "They were given, Eli. Tribes signed off. Camps need workers. Everybody wins." He knew it was a lie. Every part of it. Still, his lips stayed shut. Maybe because he was tired. Maybe because somewhere deep down he wanted to believe he could stay neutral, just the driver. No sin in driving a wagon. So he agreed. They didn't say more, just loaded the wagon, fast and quiet. When they were done, he walked out to check the canvas, but Hank blocked the way. "Don't uncover 'em. They get scared easy. Just drive." Eli didn't ask again. He didn't like what his gut was telling him. But now, out on the open trail, sun bleeding low, wind whispering secrets through prairie grass, the sacks were moving. Eli pulled the wagon off the trail, into a dry gulch shielded by cottonwoods. The horse nickered as he set the brake and stepped down, boots landing in dust. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at the still forms. Then a whisper. "Please." A girl's voice, small, hoarse. Maybe 10, maybe less. Couldn't tell through the sack. Eli's jaw clenched. He stepped to the wagon bed and reached out, fingers trembling. He tugged the knot on the first sack. Rough fabric fell away. A face, brown skin smeared with dirt. Wide, terrified eyes blinking in the sudden light. A child, barely older than 7. A cut on her lip. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. He pulled off the second sack. Another one. This time a boy, maybe 9. His face was blank, but his hands were balled into fists in his lap. No tears. No sound. Just stillness, like he'd gone somewhere inside himself. "Who are you?" Eli asked, softer than he meant to. The girl licked her lips. "We'll be quiet," she said, "if you don't put the sacks back on." Eli stared at her. For a moment, the world tilted. He looked around the gulch, as if someone might be watching. No one. Just wind and dirt, and the heavy silence of 2 small souls waiting to be erased. He climbed into the wagon and sat across from them. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy spoke first. "Chaska." Eli turned to the girl. "Wiakpa," she whispered. "Means feather." They sat there for a long time in silence. And Eli Beckett, the man who never got involved, the man who said yes to the wrong men and drove the wrong wagon, realized he couldn't drive another mile. Not with them like this, not with what it meant. But what could he do? Where could he take them? The towns wouldn't help. The army would send them back. The men who loaded them in that wagon wouldn't stay quiet if they found out he'd removed the sacks. Still, he couldn't put them back on. Not now. The girl looked at him again. "Will you leave them off?" she asked. Eli didn't answer with words, just shook his head. The boy finally spoke again. "You'll get in trouble." Eli lit a match, watched it burn down near his calloused fingers. "Been in trouble before?" he said. Then, from the distance, faint but real, came the echo of hooves. Not one horse. Many. Eli dropped the match, stood up, looked toward the riddy. His trouble was coming, and it wasn't just his anymore. The first rider appeared at dawn. Just a speck on the horizon at first, then another, and another. Eli stood beside the wagon, rifle slung low but ready, the kids crouched behind the wagon's wheelbase. He didn't know who they were yet. Didn't know if it was Travers and his men come to check on the cargo, or something worse. But he knew enough to brace himself. By the time the sun crested fully, 5 riders had arrived. Dust coated their coats and horses, and 2 of them had Union-issued repeaters on their backs, men who used to be soldiers and hadn't quite given up on commanding fear. The lead rider was Travers. He spit as he dismounted, his eyes flicking toward the wagon like a man counting coins he hadn't yet pocketed. "You're off trail," he said. "Thought you'd be at the rail station by now." Eli didn't blink. Horse needed rest. "Sure." Travers stepped closer, boots crunching dry earth. "Mind if we take a look? Just want to make sure the little ones ain't caused no trouble." Eli didn't move. "They're quiet." That wasn't the question. Travers' voice was smooth, but there was a blade under it. The other men dismounted. One adjusted his holster. Another cracked his neck. Eli noticed how none of them looked at the children, like pretending they weren't there made it easier. "I took the sacks off," Eli said flatly. The effect was instant. Travers's jaw twitched. One of the men muttered something sharp and low, and the biggest of them, a greasy-haired man named Purdy, stepped forward. "You weren't supposed to do that." "They were suffocating," Eli said. Purdy snorted. "They've been through worse. Damn savages don't feel things the way we do." The girl flinched at the word. The boy didn't move, but his shoulders tensed, and Eli saw his small hand tighten around a loose stone in the dirt. "They're just kids," Eli said, stepping slightly in front of them. "They're property," Purdy growled. Travers raised a hand. Now, no need for that word." Then to Eli, "We gave you good coin. Job ain't done. Don't go making this harder than it has to be. Eli looked down at the girl. Her lip had cracked overnight. She was trying not to cry. The boy had retreated again, not out of fear but anger. There was something in him that reminded Eli of men he'd fought beside during the war. Quiet fire, waiting to ignite. I'm not taking them to the camps, Eli said. Purdy stepped closer, hand on his belt. That's not your choice. Eli moved fast. His rifle was up before the man could draw. Not aimed to kill, not yet, but pointed straight at his gut. The other men stepped back. Only Travers didn't move. You got one shot, Beckett, he said softly. Then what? Eli didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because just then, a voice rang out from the ridge behind them. Is that him? All heads turned. Another rider was approaching. Older man, long duster flapping behind him, face burned red from sun and dust. Sheriff Matson. Travers cursed under his breath. The sheriff rode up slow, surveying the scene with hard eyes. He wasn't a good man, but he wasn't dirty either. He'd once lost a niece to a freight company adoption program. Folks said he'd never forgiven himself for signing the order. He dismounted, spat, looked at Eli. These your charges? He asked. Eli nodded once. You took sacks off them? Yes. You plan on returning them to Travers? No. Matson nodded, like that settled something. Then he turned to Travers. You told me they volunteered. These kids don't look like volunteers. Travers stepped forward. It's sanctioned, Sheriff. These two were excess mouths on the reservation. The elders— I've met the elders, Matson cut in. They wouldn't give away a dog to you, let alone children. Silence. Dust drifted on the breeze like ash. Purdy opened his mouth to speak, but the sheriff turned on him fast. Say one word and I'll bury it with you. He turned back to Eli. What's your plan? Eli exhaled slowly. Take 'em somewhere they ain't property. Maybe north. Maybe all the way to Lakota lands. Don't know yet. Matson studied him. Then he looked at the children. His eyes softened. Just a fraction. You'll need supplies, he said. Travers stepped forward. You're letting him steal them? Matson's hand drifted to the iron on his hip. You want to tell a judge you were selling kids to railroad men? Travers didn't speak. I didn't think so. He turned to Eli. You got 2 hours to get out of this county. After that, I can't protect you. Eli nodded. No anger. No gratitude either. Just a quiet understanding. Travers spat at his feet. You'll regret this, he hissed. They ain't yours to save. Eli looked at the children again. They are now? As the men rode off, the girl slipped her hand into Eli's. It was small, calloused, not the hand of someone who'd been cared for. And yet, for the first time, she didn't flinch. She just whispered, Thank you. Eli didn't reply, but his grip tightened around hers. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice he hadn't heard in years whispered, You can't save everyone. But maybe you can save 2. Just 2. That would have to be enough. They rode through the night. Eli had secured what he could. Extra grain, salted beef, a single box of cartridges Matson had slipped into the wagon bed with a quiet nod. No promises, no goodbyes. Just the hard wind of the prairie and the sound of hooves behind them as they left Dry Basin behind. By dawn, the landscape turned colder. Not the weather, the feel of it. The way the birds stopped singing. The way the wind carried only silence. He'd been out here before. Northern ridges near the Arikara hunting lands. Places white men didn't settle long. The kind of terrain that watched you more than you watched it. Chaska sat alert, back stiff as a fence post, eyes always on the horizon. Wiakpa leaned against Eli's arm now, her breath quiet but uneven, like her body was trying to forget it had ever learned to be afraid. They were maybe 2 days from Fort Banner, and 3 from the Riverlands. Eli didn't plan on going to either. Fort meant soldiers, soldiers meant questions, but if they could cut east by the canyon trail and make for the Dakota line, they might disappear for good. But first, they had to survive the next night. Just before sundown, Chaska spoke. His voice was flat. "They're watching us." Eli slowed the horse. "Where?" Chaska raised his chin. "Back trail. Second ridge." Eli turned, squinting into the dying light. For a second, nothing. Then a flicker. A single mounted figure, half hidden behind scrub. Watching. Not following. Not yet. Eli's stomach tightened. He didn't ask how Chaska had seen him. Some things didn't need explaining. They made camp under a ledge, low and fireless. Just cold jerky and well water, the children wrapped in blankets Eli had carried for trading. They didn't complain. After they ate, Chaska carved something into the dirt with a stick. An arc, 2 dots beneath it, then 4 smaller lines. "What's that?" Eli asked. Chaska didn't look up. "Warning." Eli studied it. A war symbol. A scout's message. Simple, but clear. They were being watched. That night, Eli didn't sleep. He sat by the wagon, rifle in lap, eyes on the ridge. At one point he saw a glint, moonlight on metal. Then it was gone. By morning there were tracks near. Their camp. Not close, maybe 200 feet off, but fresh. Hoof prints and moccasin impressions. A dozen at least. Eli didn't wake the kids, just packed fast and moved east. The canyon trail would make them harder to track, but if someone knew the land, and they did, it'd just funnel them into a trap. Midday came, hot and still. Then, drums. Faint at first, like distant thunder, then closer. Chaska froze. Wiakpa clung to the wagon rail, her face pale. Eli cursed under his breath. He knew that rhythm. Not the beat itself, but the meaning of it. This wasn't a war party hunting territory. This was a warning. He stopped the wagon. They were near the edge of the canyon pass now. Narrow walls, no cover. If they went forward, they'd be sitting ducks. If they turned back, they'd walk into the riders behind. So he waited. Minutes passed. Then, around the canyon bend, came a sight that made Eli's blood turn to stone. 6 riders, painted faces, spears and rifles both. At their head rode a man with silver streaks in his braids, and the kind of stare that didn't blink. He raised one hand. Eli slowly stepped down, rifle lowered, but ready. The man spoke in Lakota first. Chaska answered. Then silence. Then again. English. "You have our children." Eli nodded once. "I didn't take them." The man studied him. "You ride with the one who did." "I stopped riding with them." "They gave sacks." "You kept them on." Eli looked down. That truth cut deep. "I took them off." The man turned his gaze to the children. "Chaska," he said. The boy stood, quiet but proud. "Wiakpa." She climbed down, unsure. Then, she ran to the man and threw her arms around his leg. He didn't move at first. Then his hand slowly dropped to her hair. A long breath passed between them. The other warriors dismounted. They didn't raise their weapons, but they didn't lower their guard either. Chaska stepped forward. "He helped us," he said. "He could have sold us." The man looked at Eli again. "You were paid?" "Yes." "You kept the coin?" Eli shook his head. "Left it in Dry Basin." Silence again. Then the man said quietly, They belong with us. I know. The man stepped closer. You are not like the others, but you are not one of us. I'm not trying to be. He studied Eli's face a long time. Then, do you fear dying? Eli looked at the children, then back at the man. No. The man nodded. Then ride with us tonight. 1 day only. Then you may go. Eli frowned. Why? Because kindness must be seen, or it becomes story. Stories fade. Then he turned and whistled once. The warriors mounted again. Chaska tugged Eli's sleeve. They want you to see where we come from. And Eli, against every instinct, followed. Because part of him needed to know if what he'd done meant something, they rode as the sun bled behind the cliffs, casting fire across the desert. And somewhere above, the drums had stopped. Not because the danger was gone, but because the message had been received. They rode in silence, the kind that wrapped itself around your ribs and squeezed slowly. No songs, no stories, just hoofbeats on dry stone and the creak of worn leather. Eli didn't ask where they were going. He wasn't sure he had the right. The canyon twisted wide by moonlight, then narrowed again until it broke open into a hidden valley, carved like a bowl in the earth. It was untouched. No signs of cattle, no fences, just wildflowers and tents stitched from old buffalo hide. Smoke rose gently from a single cooking fire. Children's eyes peeked from behind firs. Elders stared without speaking. They were met by a woman in a deep red shawl. Her face was lined, but her eyes burned sharp and alive. She took Wiakpa's face in her hands and kissed her forehead, murmuring something Eli didn't understand, but he didn't need to. The girl didn't flinch this time. She wept, then laughed, then wept again. Chaska's jaw clenched, but his eyes brimmed wet as he stepped into the arms of a man too young to be his father, too relieved to be anything else. Eli stood apart, hands at his sides, unsure of his place in this reunion. The warrior with silver-streaked braids, the one called Greyhawk, turned to him. You've seen where they sleep now, what they return to. Eli nodded, eyes taking in the valley. Not just its beauty, but the signs of struggle. Bruised arms on children, tools worn to the bone, lives rebuilt from nothing after everything had been taken. This is what they tried to erase, Greyhawk said. We live quiet, because when we are loud, they come with chains. I know, Eli said low. Not everything, but enough. The older man studied him. Then he gestured to a nearby fire pit. Come, sit. Eli followed. They sat cross-legged near the flame, and for a while no words passed between them. Then Greyhawk said, You were a soldier. Eli nodded. Virginia Regiment. Fought for the North. Thought I was on the right side. Greyhawk poked the fire with a stick. They say soldiers wear honor like a coat, but coats can be taken off when the weather changes. Eli looked down. Yeah. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Unfolded, it revealed a small wooden carving, a bird with wings outstretched. He handed it over. My son, Eli said, didn't live past the day he was born. I carved that for his grave. Greyhawk took the bird in his palm, ran a thumb over the grain. You carry your ghosts close. Eli gave a sad smile. Only way I know how. A child approached the fire then. Wiakpa. She held something in both hands, careful, as if it might break. It was a bowl, wooden. Inside, stew, hot and thick with herbs and game meat. She held it out. Eli hesitated. Then she said it, soft. "You're not one of us, but you were kind." He took the bowl. Her eyes flicked up to his. "Do you still believe kindness gets you killed?" He paused. Then, "Less than I used to." Wiakpa sat beside him, quiet. She didn't ask questions, didn't speak again. She just leaned slightly, the way children do when they feel safe, but don't know how to say it. Greyhawk stood. He nodded once to Eli, then disappeared into the shadow of the tents. It was just Eli and the firelight now, and Wiakpa. And somewhere across the camp, Chaska was laughing. Not much, just one short, sharp laugh like a bird call breaking silence. Eli had never heard it before, but it was good. He looked at the girl. "Do you want to go home?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "This is home," she said eventually. "It always was. We just got lost." She stared into the flames. "I thought if I stayed quiet, no one would notice me." Eli stirred the stew with a wooden spoon. "And did that work?" She shook her head. "I noticed," he said. Her small hand found his again. "Thank you," she whispered. He swallowed the knot in his throat. "You don't need to thank me." But still, she did. That night he slept beside the fire, the bird carving back in his pocket. The stars blinked overhead, ancient and quiet, and he dreamed for the first time in years without waking up gasping. And when morning came, Greyhawk returned, leading Eli's horse with fresh oats in the saddlebag. "You must leave now," he said. "We cannot protect you from what's coming, but you leave with our eyes watching, and our hands behind your back." Eli rose, brushed dust from his coat, looked at the two children, now surrounded by faces that loved them, still fragile, still healing, but whole. He stepped toward them. Wiakpa hugged him first. Tight. Chaska, too. More awkward, but real. "I'll see you again," Eli said. They didn't reply, but the way they looked at him said enough. Then he mounted his horse, took one last look at the valley, and rode out alone, but not the same man who had ridden in. The trail east was quiet. Too quiet. No riders, no drums, no dust on the horizon, just the slow grind of hooves over dirt and stone and the steady creak of Eli's saddle. He didn't go straight home. Couldn't. Travers would have sent someone, maybe a dozen someones, maybe with papers this time, forged, official-looking, enough to justify murder. So he kept moving, low and wide, skirting rivers and broken fences, trading under false names at small cabins and way stations. Every night he'd stop, build a fire, not big, and sit with the bird carving in his hand. He thought about their faces, the children, their silence, their eyes. He thought about how easy it had been to look away, and how much harder it had been to look at them and still choose not to walk. That was the part he couldn't shake. It had changed something in him, quietly, like water through stone. Days turned to weeks. He reached the mountain rim south of Wyoming territory, where the air thinned and the stars hung close. No lawmen here. No towns big enough for papers or questions. Just men living off memory, and land that didn't take kindly to lies. He worked a sheep camp for a while, hauling feed, mending shelter. An old Basque rancher paid him with pelts and dried apples and let him be. One night by the fire, the man asked, "What do you run from?" Eli had stared into the flames a long time before answering. "Nothing I wouldn't run toward again?" The old man didn't ask more. Spring came. The snow melted slow, like it had to be persuaded. Eli was skinning a rabbit when he heard hooves again, but only one set. He stood, rifle close, heart ticking hard. The rider came into view over the ridge. Young woman, rough coat, dark braid down her back. She stopped 20 paces off, raised a hand. He didn't recognize her, not at first. Then she smiled. Small, quiet. "Wiakpa," he said, stunned. She slid off the horse. "Not Wiakpa anymore," she said. "I go by Anna now, in English towns." He blinked. She couldn't be more than 15. Taller, yes, but her eyes, they hadn't changed. "Why are you here?" he asked. She pulled a satchel from her horse and opened it. Inside, letters. Dozens. "I work as a translator now," she said, "between reservation families and the courts. I travel, I speak, I listen." He stared at her. She stepped closer. "I ask questions no one else does." He gestured to the satchel. "Those all from people like you?" She nodded. "Some have daughters missing, sons taken. Some need help writing back." Eli sat down on the log by the fire. She joined him. For a long while neither spoke. Finally she reached into her coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth, handed it over. He unwrapped it slowly. The wooden bird, his carving. But now it had something added, a red string woven around one wing and carved into the underside in careful hand. "We were seen." He looked up, throat tight. "I thought I lost this," he said. "You gave it to me," she replied. "You just didn't know it yet." Tears burned behind his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. "Are you safe?" he asked. She nodded. "Some days no, but most days, yes. And I'm not alone." He studied her. "You're braver than I ever was." She smiled again. "You didn't have to be brave. You just had to stop the wagon." A gust of wind danced through the brush. She stood. "I have to go. Letters to deliver. Families waiting." He rose with her. She paused before mounting her horse. "There are more of us now," she said. "People who remember what kindness looks like, because of men like you." He shook his head. "I'm just one man." "One man," she said, "who didn't put the sacks back on." She rode off into the dusk, just as the first stars started showing. Eli stood there, the bird in his hand, heart fuller than it had been in decades. And that night, as he lay beneath the sky with nothing but firelight and old ghosts for company, he felt something settle. Not peace. Not quite. But maybe is something close to it. Years later, long after his hair had greyed and his hands had grown too slow to work, a book arrived at a post station just outside the Dakota lines. Bound in plain hide, no title on the cover. Inside, stories, testimonies, letters. One of the early pages had a line etched in a steady hand. "This is dedicated to the ones who stopped the wagons, even when no one asked them to." And below that, especially Eli Beckett. No one in town knew who that was. But an old man reading by the stove smiled quiet and turned the page.